If you're listening to this podcast, you must recognize the value of asking questions. At Aramco, our questions help us engineer a better future. How can today's resources fuel our shared tomorrow? How can we deliver energy to a world that can't stop? How can we deliver one of the fuels of the future? How can we sow curiosity to harvest ingenuity? To learn more about how innovation drives us forward, visit aramco.com/poweredbyhow.
On today's Smart 7, communications cut off in Gaza, Mike Pence quits the race and lots more. It's Monday 30th of October, it's World Audio Drama Day. And happy birthday Nia Long.
The Smart 7. It's news, but not the news.
Over 8,000 Palestinians are thought to have been killed and many thousands more injured as the third week of war between Israel and the Hamas group draws to a close. Friday saw a near-total communications blackout in Gaza, which lasted almost 36 hours after Israeli airstrikes damaged infrastructure along the Strip. It cut Palestinian residents off from the outside world and prevented humanitarian groups from being able to contact their aid workers on the ground. Meanwhile, more than 14,000 displaced Palestinians and hundreds of patients were ordered to immediately evacuate from the Al-Quds hospital in Gaza City on Sunday, where they'd been sheltering from Israeli bombing. But Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says those who accuse his soldiers of wrongdoing have the wrong end of the stick.
Those who dare accuse our soldiers of war crimes are people imbued with hypocrisy and lies, who do not have a single drop of morality. The army is the most moral army in the world.
But the former permanent representative of the United Kingdom to the United Nations, Sir Mark Leal Grant, says Israel risks losing international support if they continue with their tactics.
If this continues as it does and thousands more civilians die in Gaza, then Israel will lose completely international opinion.
As the conflict in Gaza continues, protests took place across the world this weekend, with hundreds of thousands of people marching in support of Palestine. Around 70,000 people joined the demonstration in London calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. 9 people were arrested, although the UK government says they're working with police on a stricter clampdown on hate crimes. But Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley says his force knows the law.
We're arresting tens of people across London for anti-Semitic hate crimes. We've made arrests in relation to the protests for people stirring up hate crime. We've got many more appeals out. You'll see more arrests this week. We absolutely do care.
Meanwhile, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer's facing criticism from within his own party for his refusal to call for a full ceasefire rather than just a humanitarian pause. Labour's Shadow Science Secretary Peter Kyle says the calls are too broad.
What they need now, today, is support. They need food, they need water, they need medicine, and they need fuel to power some of the hospital facilities that are there. We can do that right away quickly if we can agree to a humanitarian pause. Some of the calls for broader ceasefires, it's just too ambiguous to know what it means in practice.
American software company Palantir looks set to win a controversial £500 million contract that will see them sell AI software to the NHS. It's supposed to strengthen NHS data analysis capabilities and improve services, but there's concern that it could lead to private health data being sold to third parties. The company has been criticised for their tactics in the past after charging the NHS just £1 for use of their data management software during the COVID-19 pandemic. But Palantir CEO Alex Karp says there's no way for his company to access private data.
Almost every other private company in the world, besides my company, will take that data and transfer it to somebody else. Palantir doesn't do that.
Yeah, but you might in the future.
We've never done it in 20 years.
Sure, but you may in the future.
Well, first of all, we wouldn't even be able to.
There were shockwaves across the US this weekend as former Vice President Mike Pence announced he's pulling out of the 2024 presidential race. He's a traditional fiscal and social conservative who served 4 years as backup to President Trump, but his campaign struggled to gain much traction. He's the highest profile Republican to drop out of the race, and the decision to end his presidential bid comes less than 93 days before the Iowa caucuses. Here he is making the announcement on Saturday at a gathering of Jewish Republican donors.
Traveling across the country over the past 6 months, I came here to say it's become clear to me, this is not my time. So after much prayer and deliberation, I have decided to suspend my campaign for president effective today.
Still to come on the Smart 7, Derby Day defeat for Man United, and Dawn French has some advice. Right after this. Welcome back. It's been another busy weekend of Premier League action. Spurs retained their spot at the top of the table with a win over Crystal Palace, whilst Arsenal are hot on their heels after a stunning 5-0 victory over Sheffield United, which saw them move into second. It was a weekend to forget for Man United, who were defeated 3-0 at home by Man City on Sunday. An Erling Haaland brace was followed up by a tap-in from Phil Foden in the 80th minute to seal the victory for the citizens, but it was midfielder Bernardo Silva who was getting all the praise from City boss Pep Guardiola.
He's a player that is beyond good in all departments, and solidarity, intelligent, and understand everything, and we are in love with him, so that is our
Actor and comedian Dawn French has had a jam-packed couple of years. She's been touring her one-woman show Dawn French is a Huge Twat across the UK since 2022, and she's just released a new memoir called The Twat Files, which documents all the mistakes she's made in her life. She was on Woman's Hour this weekend to talk about it and says we should take ourselves less seriously.
Well, I didn't know that it's almost like a sort of social right. It's almost a kind of basic human need to exchange stories of our idiocy so that we can understand each other and better love each other.
He was one of the iconic Friends cast, familiar to billions worldwide. He was Matthew Perry, and on Sunday morning he died aged 54. His portrayal of the wisecracking Chandler Bing was a huge part of the success of the sitcom Friends, which was watched around the world. He was nominated for 3 Emmys in his career, including one for his work in The West Wing. He spoke openly about his struggle with alcohol and an addiction to prescription painkillers that saw him in and out of rehab, even as the show was at its peak. He took the battle with addiction seriously and set up a sober house in Malibu dedicated to helping fellow addicts. In fact, he spoke about how important that work was and how he wanted to be remembered back in 2022. Rest in peace, Matthew.
Best thing about me, bar none, is if somebody comes up to me and says, I can't stop drinking, can you help me? I can say yes and follow up and do it. That's the best thing. And I've said this for a long time. When I die, I don't want Friends to be the first thing that's mentioned. I want that to be the first thing that's mentioned. And I'm going to live the rest of my life proving that.
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day. Give us 7 minutes, we'll give you the world.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
I'm Matt Gorley.
And I'm Amanda Lund. Join us for Keys to the Kingdom,
An unprecedented peek behind the curtain of the world's greatest theme parks from the people who have all the best stories.
the characters.
Raise your hand if you're permanently disabled from working at Disneyland.
Over the whole thing is a giant jumpsuit made of 100% yak fur.
And I got some very interesting sexual propositions as a giant Klingon lady.
Looking down into the tram, undoes his pants, and begins to urinate directly onto the tourists.
Keys to the Kingdom, out October 16th.
Subscribe now.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.